2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Martin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
That's wonderful that the program had that effect. And that was about a month into a 3-month program.
Yeah. Tell
us more then what started to happen, or what was next in the story.
I don't know. There was still a lot that needed to be done for sure. He definitely needed to own his story a little bit more. So it wasn't like it was just like the glimpses of a recovery.
The tip of the iceberg.
The tip of it, yeah. So there was so much work to be done, but the hope was always, we would talk about it, how there's so much shame in it, but I would tell him, you can turn this around and help others. Mm. And he would have been so good at that, because that was his innate nature, is to help others.
Sure.
And to be like the teacher and the coach, like he would have been so great at that. He just needed more time.
Yeah.
But as somebody who's in recovery, sometimes you get to that point. You've got a month of clarity, and then you've got a mountain of mess that you've created ahead of you. And I can tell you, there's times and you go, I just don't think I can do this. I don't think I have it in me. Yeah. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to start. And all of that starts to set in. And unfortunately, Brian's no longer with us.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're all right. Because unfortunately, there's too many stories that end this way.
Yeah. Yeah, way too many.
And I think that while we're kind of telling the rest of the story here, it's important for people to kind of review what you guys are talking about. There's a predictable dip in therapeutic change where a person may be using a lot of denial and repression to get through the day. Yeah. And then they come in and they get honest and they make a connection. And then that kind of opens up their eyes to all the work they have to do ahead of them, regardless of what the issue is. In this case, it's addiction, but it could be any reason that a person comes in for treatment. And you can pull out a textbook, unfortunately, and watch that curve where a person's mood and hopefulness takes a dip after getting a little bit better at first. You come in, you feel that support, and then the reality of what you have ahead of you can sometimes create kind of a dip. And unfortunately, a lot of people withdraw from treatment at that point or hesitate to continue into treatment. And so that's a really crucial time to help a person through. In addiction, of course, it's we have a dangerous substance that can be part of that dip where a person might feel at one moment of the day hopeful. He's obviously feeling better. Brian was connecting with you more. And then at other moments of the day feel kind of hopeless and overwhelmed about the reality of, like you said, the mess that might have been made or getting rid of the shame, which is so
you can have
insidious.
That 4 or 5 times that roller coaster in one day.
Oh, sure.
In the same 5 minutes where you walk around and you go, okay, I got this. And then all of a sudden, bam, you go, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And sometimes in your recovery, when you get that clarity and you start to be honest with yourself, and you think of all the selfish things you've done and all of that, and you look in the mirror and you've said to yourself, you're a good guy. But at that point, you weren't a good guy. And the things you did were selfish and hurtful. And I mean, I can tell you right now when I look at my kids and I see them sleeping, or I look at my ex-wife, or I look at my girlfriend, I look at my parents, and I go, I wasn't. I mean, I told myself I was a good guy, but all those things I did, I wasn't a good guy.
And I think it's important for a person to try to own that and at the same time depersonalize it. You know, you can't
that's
carry.
Tough.
That's oh my gosh,
that's tough.
So hard.
I mean, especially with therapy and all that. And I don't know Brian, but I can just sympathize and kind of relate my story to it. But I mean, he was the weight of the world.
Yeah, for sure. We would talk about that specifically, you know, and how it relates to shame, and then. And this is from a Brene Brown book, I think, how she labels shame and guilt. Mm-hmm. So shame is saying I'm a bad person, and guilt is saying I did a bad thing.
Yeah.
And we would, you know, and Brian he's a good person. You
mm-hmm.
can't take that away. He did some bad things.
Right.
But it doesn't change the fact that he is a good person.
Right, and that he was, it sounds like, in the process of trying to come to grips with the difference between shame and guilt and where he placed his label for himself. Am I a person who am I a bad person who did these things, or am I a good person who did some bad things, who did some things that were destructive? And even using the word bad feels kind of heavy because, you know, we know that people, that these addictions change their brain chemistry, change their perspective. Unless a person's dealt with this themselves, they don't really know what it feels like to be out of control and have this other entity in control. But you're right, it doesn't change the innate goodness of that person and their character. And we've been fortunate to talk to people who have been able to get back to that. And it's sad. And I was concerned, but also excited in a way to have you come on and talk about this part of the story, because I want to highlight the fact that Brian is a good person and somebody who took care of his family and his community, and these behaviors were hard for him to separate the two.
Not only that, having his addiction be publicized, you know, in the news and public opinion. I mean, I could relate to that.
People weigh in, don't they?
Yeah. And people who don't know. And as part of my recovery, I had to read everything everybody wrote about me. Yeah. And some of it was true. Yeah. And some of it wasn't. But it doesn't stop them from thinking that or saying that.
Right. And it gets down to, you know, people not understanding this isn't a choice. Yeah. It's not something that, you know, Brian wanted to do for sure. Right. But it got a hold of him, and at some point he was grappling with this largely on his own. It wasn't until earlier this year that he started to even get, you know, real support.
That's right.
So Brian was in the recovery center, or the IOP, for a month.
That was it. I mean, yeah, he still had a long ways to go, but he was liking it, and he was learning a lot of really good stuff. It was an education process, so they would do like a subject every day, because we talked every day. I'm like, what'd you learn today? And, you know, he's talking about, you know, the different centers of the brain, or we were talking about gratitude today, or we were talking about accountability, or they had all kinds of different topics, and usually they would present like some research with it too, and it was school, you know.
Well, and these are things that a person doesn't study normally, right? We don't normally study this until we're faced with it, but being educated on it probably helped him start to develop some insight about himself, and probably for you as well.
Yeah, and for me too, with my support group, that's an education process that I needed. You know, because, you know, I work in healthcare, and I know, like, what addiction, but until you live it, too, as not the addict, but the loved one of the addict, like, oh, this is what it's like. Mm-hmm. This is what it's like to live with an addict, or to be married to an addict. And you have to learn all that terminology, like, what is codependency? What is a boundary? What is, you know, there was so many things I didn't know what the definition was, and, you know, was I enabling him in any way? You know, yes, and like, so I had to make improvements on myself. And it's you need that help. You need to get educated yourself on how to love this person, and still protect yourself. I had to protect my kids and my babies and me, and we had to, it's like an AA step where I think one of them is your life becomes unmanageable. Well, our life just blew up, so how am I going to bring order and control back to our life? How this is a new life now, and how are we going to live it? So I had to learn a lot. And I just think that's just so key. I had to work my own steps. It's not steps like
your own program.
I had to work my own program for sure.
And it sounds like some of the people that you were surrounded with provided some education and support.
Yeah.
But you were still you had to implement all of that yourself at home with your kids.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, what happened to Brian?
He passed away. He used again. He'd been clean for weeks because I checked in on him. He gave me access to his drug tests, and so I knew they were all clean the whole time he was in treatment. So he passed away in his parents' home. His therapist found him because we would call every morning. So I actually asked him, we did a group session with his therapist, and then it was the week before he passed away. I said, I want you to call me every morning. So I can hear your voice and check in on you. There were some other things we would talk about each morning. He didn't call one morning. And usually he would call on his way into treatment. So I just figured he was running late, and he'd call me afterwards. And he didn't call. So I called his therapist. I said, did Brian show up today? He said, no. Do you want me to do a well check? I said, what's that? He said, do you want me to go by the house? I said, yes, go by the house. And so he did. And I was on the phone with him when he found him. But I would call it a tender mercy that it wasn't anyone in his family or his kids that found him.
It's all right. This is the ending that nobody wants to have happen. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it. Why did you want to come on the show and talk about it?
I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience, and this isn't even really me doing this show. But I have 3 boys. And I don't ever want them to go through what their dad went through. I have to educate myself so I can educate them properly on addiction, and that they need to always know
that their mom will always love them no matter what messes in life come their way. Every addict should know that they are loved and valued. But at the same time, every loved one and family member should never have to put up with abuse. Or, I'm not saying there was ever abuse on our side, really. But if you're in that situation, it's not the same as what I went through with Brian. They should have access to help. But my boys need to know that my love is unconditional, and that addiction is real, and everybody needs a better education on the subject so we can I don't know, help everyone involved.
You know, you mentioned that one of your primary reasons for coming on the show is to be part of the process of helping your own boys grow up, and we do need to educate our families and our friends so that they don't have to have a tragedy in order to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So that they talk with their children openly about the fact that good people can get snared in something as awful as addiction, and how it can affect them, that it's not something to play around with.
Yeah.
We really are in the middle of an opiate addiction in the United States, and it affects people who you would never think fit the stereotype of addiction. And we need to take it seriously and talk with our children, our spouses, our people within our family and friends, to make sure that people understand that talking and being open and asking for help, or just asking questions. Kids need to be encouraged to talk and ask their questions about it. And your boys are going to have a lot of questions, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I admire the fact that you're being strong for them, but then also for other people, being able to, in a way, live Brian's legacy as a teacher and as a coach, somebody who can turn around and help others.
Yeah.
So how are you doing now?
It's just I don't know how I'm doing. I get that question actually a lot, and I don't even know. We're making it work. We're just getting through it.
You know, I can relate to that, because that's all you can do at some point is just make it work.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a switch. There's not going to be a magic number that you go, okay.
It's definitely one day at a time. What are some things that are making a difference in your life and your family's life right now? What are some things that are helping you guys?
One thing that really helps me is just sticking to our routine, and just, you don't feel like getting out of bed, but I have 3 kids, so it's not an option to sleep all day, which is good because that's what I would probably do. But I get up and I take them to their swimming lessons, and then, you know, we play during the day. It's summer, and we do our things, and I love our bedtime ritual. You know, we have our prayers and we have our bedtime stories. We have a bath and get your jammies in, brush your teeth. And those things feel so amazingly normal to me. It's so healing. And I just love it so much. It just, you can almost feel normal again when you have to do those things.
That routine is very grounding for the kids. And
but then sometimes because I know exactly what you're talking about, sometimes I feel guilty that I feel normal. Does that make sense?
Sure.
That I go, I'm going through all this stuff, and I've got these little moments that feel so normal and everything's right, but I know the reality behind me, and so sometimes I feel guilty about that. But
what that does for you is allows you to be in a healthy, grounded place, especially for your children. You both have children, and they need to see the two of you being able to get up and get going every day, and not in a denial sort of way, but in a healthy progress, we're going to keep moving sort of way.
You know, the thing I was pleasantly surprised by was, through my whole ordeal, the kindness of strangers. You know, that I thought, why? Why would you be doing this for me? You don't even know me.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know why they did it, or maybe they had their own reasons, but it always just touched my heart that I go, the fact that you would stop and write a letter to me, or pay for my groceries, or give me a ride, I was just like, wow.
I know. It's overwhelming, actually. There's been so many different ways people have reached out. People want to help with your kids. People want to bring food. They give you money. A lot of time anonymously. They write you notes. I have all these children's books on grief, and they're so sweet, and they're a way for me to have conversations with my boys when we do our books together.
Because I can't even imagine, you know, the conversations and the questions that you're having with your kids right now. Unfortunately, I wouldn't want anybody to have those, but they...
But communication is the key to things improving and getting better in all aspects of life. And I'm convinced that is part of what you guys are doing and part of what's making a difference.
We try to. You know, we still have all the videos of Daddy we can watch, and they're so young. They're 7, 3, and 10 months. But we talk about him because it actually feels wrong not to. So
sure,
he sounded like an amazing man, an amazing father, an amazing person.
Yeah, he was.
If someone out there might be in a similar situation as you, as a wife to an addict, and what advice would you give them?
Get a support group. It's one of the best things that I did. That for me. I mean, I guess for some people they prefer like more one-on-one or something, but I really.
But there's power in that support group. Those are people that, to some degree or to a large degree, really can empathize and understand. And so sharing your story with them and hearing theirs, I think that is powerful. And really, that's the only place you can find something like that. Yeah. And I can tell that has made a big difference for you.
Yeah.
Emily, I don't know how I can thank you enough for coming on and sharing your and Brian's story, and just being so honest and open with us. And thanks for listening to the podcast. Be the best mom you can be, and I know you are. And we love you.
And, you know, Casey, I think one of the things that I want to make sure we talk about before we wrap up today is not only the advice. I hope people will listen to your story, Emily, and maybe take the courage to do some of the things that you did and help their situation improve along the way. I also want to give people an opportunity to be supportive, and we're going to put up on our social media a link to a GoFundMe account to help with some of the costs and things so that are happening in a family where, you know, the insurance got lost and the finances are difficult to pay for treatment and now support for the boys. And so I hope people will take a minute to look at that.
So if you can, go there, click on it, and give what you can. Emily, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And if you know somebody that is suffering, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.